Hello to my OLO friends. There's always a little delay. Thank you for joining us today. Super excited to do some bear coloring. Hope you guys are having a good Thursday. It's hard to believe that it's already Thursday, actually. Hey, Linda. How are you? It is flying by. September is flying by. So I have a bunch of, I actually was watching another live on the OLO channel about a different way to do fur textures, but I have done a bunch of fur texture videos in the last little while. And so this one's going to be fun because it's going to be kind of a different sort of, fur texture than maybe what you're used to, and maybe a different kind of fur texture from other animals. Because if you watched the video that I did on the OLO channel, this was a week or two ago, it was on this little Winnie the Pooh bear. And I was talking about how stuffed animals have kind of like a matted almost texture to their fur, especially if they're very well loved. And bears in particular, real bears as well as teddy bears, get that kind of matted fur as well, because their fur is designed to be waterproof, and so it can get kind of matted. If any of you guys watch the Bear Week shenanigans on Discovery Channel, you'll really, really love today's little lesson. So I'm going to show you how to do this matted fur texture, and it uses a really simple process. So, and I will tell you that while you're doing this process, it's very simple, very zen, relaxing. It would be easy to do in front of the TV. Just grab some of your markers. It doesn't take very many markers, as you can see. But I will tell you that along the way, it's going to not look great. And it gets better because it's a kind of a layering process. So expect that. It's completely normal. So what I've done is I have stamped a big giant bear, and I actually I stamped this little Christmas hat first, and then I used masking paper to cover that up, and then I stamped the bear. So I thought we could make like a Christmas theme. So for the fur texture, I wanted to show you, these are the colors that I'm using. I have found that 4 colors work really, really well for this technique. Hey, Lori Craig, how are you? Because you want to start with a very light overall color. So if you can imagine what you're coloring, whatever the highlight color would be, that's what you want to start with for your lightest color. Then you can have, like I said, I like 4 for this technique, but you could probably get away with 3, but you'll want medium toned colors. You're trying to bridge these little gaps. So you have your lightest color, then you have one a couple shades darker, then you have a darker, and then you need a really deep dark shadow color, which is what the OR 3.8 is going to do here. And we will do, the way that I get this teddy bear look is we're going to go through these colors in this order. This is actually something I do with colored pencils as well. And then we're going to go back through them in this order to get to the final look. And like I said, it's going to be an ugly duckling in the middle, but it's okay. Trust me. Trust me. So before I get started on the bear texture, I thought I would do the fun part of the little Santa Claus element, because this is just going to be so quick to color, and that is just to color his little hat. The fine tip of this marker will let you leave a little highlight if you want, which I like to do. For some reason, I don't know why, you can see it on this one that I did the video on. I really like to do it with red objects. I don't know why. It's just a quirk. So, but I will leave a little highlight, and I just kind of go back and forth with little flicking motions from the edge. When you do this, you need to make sure that you kind of go along that edge as well, especially in such a tight space as this, just to make sure that you didn't leave like there's a little white dot. So you can do that. And the more irregular the highlight, so if sometimes the little red parts are touching and sometimes they're not, I find that to be realistic whether you're looking at a hard surface or you're looking at like a fabric surface like this. So if they're just a little irregular, I think it looks a little bit more natural. So thank you for being here, OLO Marker. Okay, so see how that it's very simple, but it's effective. And with anything that's round, I like to leave a little highlight. You're going to see this on his nose. I'll leave a little highlight on his nose as well. I did Google, this is one of the fun things about coloring with markers. I did have to Google what color are bear feet today. BEAR feet. Because as you might imagine, I've never seen like a live bear's feet close up. And so I wanted to know what color their little foot pads were. And you will be surprised to find that they are not black, which is what I was going to color them. They're actually kind of a lighter brown. So I looked at a lot of pictures of bear feet today. The things I do for you people. Okay, this I'm not going to do anything fancy on. I'm just coloring the leaves green. So that concludes the Christmas portion of the program. Okay, so like I said, I have stamped this little guy. In my climate, I have to heat set even my alcohol-friendly ink because it's very humid here. And so you might have to do that as well. And we're going to do the first layer. And for the first layer of this technique, you want to start with your lightest color. And just remembering that what this is going to be when it's all over is just a highlight. So you do not need to spend any time blending this color. If there are streaks, it's fine because they're just going to be little bits of this peeking out when you're done with the technique. Because like I said, bears and teddy bears, they have these little mats of fur. And in our little exercise today, we're going to make those little mats kind of round because I am using the brush marker and it's very easy to make a round or oval shape kind of repetitively with these brush tips. So like I said, no blending. We're just putting down this nice, this is 2.2, YO 2.2, nice kind of peachy almost color all over this bear that will end up just showing up as highlights. So I still like to do a little flicking because I like the texture of alcohol markers. I like that you can get kind of a fade if you're both pushing the tip of the marker and lifting up at the same time. It's a habit that I developed after taking a class from our own Lori Craig. She's the one who taught me how to push that tip of that marker away and lift it at the same time to get these little streaks. Now, even though this isn't going to happen in nature, or maybe it does, maybe somebody knows, I'm going to make my bear a blue-eyed bear at the end of it. So I'm avoiding coloring in both his nose and his eyes because we're going to give him just a little festive blue eye. Now, when you're using a stamped image for this technique, one of the things that you'll notice as we go along is you can use these areas of natural shading that the stamp illustrator put into the image to guide the portions of the technique that are going to add shading to this bear's fur. So, and I'm being kind of ginger around the darker areas because, like I said, my climate is humid and I have to be careful that everything's dry. So I try not to kind of get into those dark, inky areas too much with my lightest color. So we only have a couple of weeks really every year where we're not fighting that humidity, even with all our air conditioning in Texas is no match for the humidity that we get in Central Texas. Okay, so I'll cover his little belly. This area, you'll see me add some shading in because they actually look like this in real life. The way their muscles are, that's recessed a little bit. And then his feet are so cute, first of all. But this portion right here is the one that I was talking about, is kind of a lighter brown color. And so I'm not going to put my lightest color on here. Yes, ginger. I like it. Now I also keep, this happens to be the masking paper that I cut the Santa hat out of to mask it. But sometimes if I find I do get a little bit of ink on my brush because I'm being impatient or whatever, I just use a little scrap set off to the side to kind of clean that tip of that marker. Okay, so now here comes the fun part. Now we're going to launch into the ugly duckling portion of the program, but you're going to be happy, I promise. And if you have a couple little, you can see I have a couple little white areas here. Let me show you this up close where I didn't get them completely covered. Same down here. Don't worry about it. It's not going to matter at the end of the day. So on this one, which is actually a sample that I blended a lot more than we're going to blend today, you can see these round shapes that I'm talking about for the fur. And that's what we're going to create. And this is the second color. So this is the one that's just the next darker from my YO 2.2. So this is YO 2.5. And what you're going to do is just make dots with the tip of the brush. The longer you hold the tip of the brush down, the larger those dots are going to be. You can also put the brush on its side and make kind of an oval shape. You can do a combination of both. It really doesn't matter. And this does not have to be ginger. You can apply firm pressure. These are very durable brush points. And this sort of pressing down to get this circular shape really is going to add quite a bit to the texture. So your strategy, this is a large image. This one obviously was much smaller. But your strategy with your second color is to go pretty far into the areas that are going to be shaded. So you can see I'm going pretty far into this paw with this color because I have two more colors to go. So those darker colors, the darker I get, the farther I will move away from the highlight area. And I'll let these lighter colors kind of shine in these highlighted areas of the bear. So the bear's arm is round, right? So it's like this marker. So this center area would naturally be the lightest. So that's why I'm leaving that open. And now you can sort of see what I mean about your lightest overall color is going to remain as your highlight color. And here I'm going over the areas that the illustrator put in as shadow. And I'll be using darker things here, but that's where I start to kind of move into the image. So around his nose would naturally be in shadow. He has some little areas on his face. His ears, the edges of his ears would be darker. The top of his head would be darker. And don't put a ton of thought into where these dots are going to go. Like I said, this is one of those Zen chill out in front of the TV things that you could just grab an image and you could do this sort of dotting technique and not even think about it. Sort of like Zen tangling. It's that easy of a coloring technique. Okay, so we're going to go into his chest area and make sure that's covered in dark, leaving the highlight like in kind of a V out here where his chest would be sticking out a little bit. I remember going out west to Yellowstone and places like that on our summer vacations, and we would drive across the country when I was a kid. And it seemed like every tourist attraction, every little lodge, every, gift shop. Remember when there were gift shops everywhere? Always had a giant bear in the doorway. And I developed this irrational fear of bears when I was a kid, and my family used to just laugh every time we'd be driving through some little windy mountain road. And I'd say, I just knew a bear was going to get us. It's pretty rare. I think we can conclude that that was an irrational fear. But they're the ones who took me to all the gift shops with all the big bears in them. Okay, so see what I mean by ugly duckling? So you're like, what in the world? That bear just looks sick. It doesn't look like he has fur, but just wait. I promise this will pay off and you will love the result. Now, as I move into the darker colors, any area of this image that's actually black, so like right here, in order to really make that blend with your OLO markers, you will want to put your darkest color over that, because I'll show it to you now before I do that. And you can see how much flatter it is than the area which has the alcohol ink on it. That is just a difference between those two mediums. They're always going to look more vibrant and lifelike if you put marker on top of them, even if it's just a black marker. In this case, I'm not going to be using a black marker, but since it is a different medium, it's going to look different from everything around it unless you add a little bit of the OLO to it. So don't forget those darker areas as you are. If you are a stamper and you are coloring on top of stamped images, that's a good thing to remember. Now, his claws are pretty skinny, so I'm leaving those white, but you may have to come back with your blender and remove color, or you can go on top of it with a white gel pen, whatever you like. Okay, so this is these two layers. Like I said, we're going to go forwards and backwards. So now we're going to move on to 2.7. So far I'm still in the same color family. I will switch here in a little bit, but for now I'm still in my YO period, and I can go a little bit faster. Now what you want to do is go over the first two areas with your next color. And you'll be able to see here, because these are not super far away from each other in tonal value, that you're already sort of getting a little blend. Even though we're not blending, we're just putting these shapes on top of each other. But you are, even when you're just going on top of another color and it gets obscured completely, you are still getting a blend. You're able to see that lightest color, you're able to see the medium color, and you're able to see this third medium color. So you can sort of speed up as you do this process. But like I said, even when we get to this dark brown, we're only going to be halfway finished, because the real magic is in going back through the colors in the opposite direction. And you'll see what I mean. But he is looking a little healthier now with his second dose of marker. And I'm still being careful to go over the shaded areas here. Now, if you want that variation in shape, just put your marker on the side. I'm not really as fast at doing that as I am with the dots, so I tend to just stick to the dots. But as I go back through the colors the opposite way, I will use those variations in shapes, because what that does is it pulls all 4 of the shades that I'm going to end up using together. So here on his feet, because I don't have much room, you're going to end up seeing kind of a dominant color in those skinny areas, and that's fine. You can also mix in some dots into the highlight area, but what I would advise you to do is wait until the last stage to add that. We really want to be preserving highlights when we're at this stage in the process, because they disappear fast when they disappear, and you can lose them entirely if you get a little bit too ambitious about going into those lighter kind of peachy areas. So any animal with a kind of matted fur, or anything that you want to look like a stuffed animal, this is a great technique for. Stuffed animals is how I started doing this, because I think it really ends up looking like a teddy bear. So, hey, Linda. How are you? Okay, so I'm making sure on the dark areas to go around his nose. Now, in the end, I will end up adding some color to his nose, but for now, because that is the most prominent part on his face, I am leaving that all highlighted. So that's kind of one of those detail things we're going to do at the end. And the most important thing is, don't forget something like a whole leg, which I've been known to do. You just get to coloring, you get in your little zone, like, oh my gosh, I forgot his whole left leg. So make sure you glance all the way around the bear a couple of times. Okay, so he's still spotty. Don't worry. Trust the process. And now we will go to our darkest color. So for this one, I actually switched color families. So this is an OR 3.8. And this is a nice, really dark brown. So you can really get shading. Now we're going to get the dark darks that make any image that you're coloring really pop. And this is where you want to be really careful to cover that black ink. And I'll show you an example. So here is the ink. Even though I have a couple of the lighter colors on it, you're going to see how much better it looks when it has this, whatever your darkest color is. It doesn't matter if this is a purple or a blue or whatever. Your darkest color is really going to pop a lot more. So you can see I have it on the right side, but I don't have it on the left. So it's much flatter wherever you don't have that ink. Because alcohol ink is kind of magical. You get that nice transparency, which you're not going to get with the black ink. And that's why it looks so much more lively on an image like this than just flat ink will. One of the many properties that we all love about alcohol markers. Okay, so I'm going to fill in his paws. Again, moving pretty quickly here. Giving him the shading that every big grizzly bear, I'm coloring him like a grizzly bear, deserves. And no matter what, how fierce these little bears look, they're always cute. It doesn't matter if they weigh 1,000 pounds. It doesn't matter if they've hibernated all winter and they're on that Bear Week show and they're looking kind of grungy. They're still cute. They're always cute. Bears are an eternally cute animal. I watch this lady who does these solo trail rides through all over the US, but she does a lot of them in California. She's on Instagram. And today there was a bear across her trail, which that can be alarming out there by yourself, just you and your horse. And it was a black bear. And even while I was watching the video and kind of feeling, you know, that it was a little, could be a scary situation, I was still like, that dang bear is so cute. Okay, here's another area that was very flat without the darkness of your darkest marker. So we will liven that up. And then his foot, see how his feet are in front of his legs? So you'll want to put a little of the dark marker there as well, just to give you the spatial illusions. Okay, the lighter the pressure you make your dot with, the smaller the dots will be. So here's a nice big dot from just the normal technique that I cover everything with. And then here are some little dots for texture. And I tend to do those kind of towards the end, especially with the darker marker, because they do a lot of the kind of filling in. And then here's where I go find where I forgot anything. Okay, so this is the first pass. This is all of the colors, all the way dotted in all the places that they need to be. And now the magic happens as we go backwards. So that was my darkest brown. I've put all 4 colors down. Now I'm going to go backwards. So this is my third darkest brown. This is YO 2.7. And what I do here is I dot around the layer that came before. So since we finished with the darkest brown, you want to focus the second darkest brown around that darkest brown, all of those little dots. And what this does is it has the effect, and I'll just do half the bear so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. It has the effect of softening and blending those fur layers together. It's sort of filling in the gaps where maybe you could see the highlight, maybe you could see the second darkest brown, but it's going to become much smoother through this process. But unlike just traditional, where you're just coloring and blending, unlike that, you're still going to retain this dot fur texture, even though it's going to look a lot more blended than it did in all of the previous steps. And that will continue until we get back to our lightest color. So we will just soften this little guy down, but it's just taking the roundness out. Even though I'm continuing to put those round shapes in, it will blend it all together magically. I put a lot of little dots on his toes there. Okay, so I will complete this one half of the bear so that you can see how different it looks from the rest. And what I'll do is I'll finish this half of the bear and then we'll do the other half so that you can see the difference. Olo's Kim, I believe. So you can already see it's a little smoother over here than it is over here. Still pretty dotty. So now you go to your second darkest, which for us is the YO 2.5, and you just do the same thing. Now here I start to sort of encroach into those highlight areas. So I'm tapping around the third darkest brown, but I'm also kind of closing that in a little bit. So there's not just like a ton of what I would consider white space there, because the highlights on fur are going to be pretty few and far between. But I do want to cover up anything that's white, anything that I just kind of left and didn't color in the first stage. So this is just a very gentle kind of back and forth process. Now on this layer, this is where you want to kind of close in his nose. So we are going to add just a little bit of color to his nose and continue to work these darker areas. And then we will move to our lightest, because even though you have, so you started with a solid layer of your lightest color. And even though you have that down there, anytime that you're adding more ink on top of there, you can get the effect that it actually looks like a different color if you're layering on top of another dry layer of ink. So just keep that in mind, that layering single colors works really well too. Okay. So now you can see he looks different on this side than he does on this side. He's still very distinct and dotty over here. So now we will move on. I keep forgetting to put these in order, to YO 2.2. And I will put that down here. And with the lightest color, you can go all over all of your previous colors. You now have a lot of ink on the paper. And so you can soften down all of the previous layers, and they will blend even more as you do that. I'm also going to go back into the nose section. And when I add that lightest layer of ink, that really starts to blend the lightest color on his nose and makes that look a little bit less mottled. Now, this is a modeling technique. I mean, you want this kind of teddy bear texture to look mottled. That's the whole point of putting the dots down in the first place. But as you start to blend it, you retain the texture. Here, I'll show you this one close up. You can really see it right here, where you retain that fur, that kind of matted fur texture, but it's not as distinct as that. So it's just that process of going back and forth. So, and you may need to, like we may go back to the medium brown too. It just depends on how it looks when we're all done. But you'll know when a section needs more ink and when you're all inked up and ready to go. But he really is starting to get that clumpy bear texture that I love so much. So what are you guys coloring? What's your favorite thing to color? Mine probably is fur, honestly. And see how you've retained the highlight? You can still close in on it, but it's there because you left so much space for it in all the previous layers. It really makes a big difference. It's very easy to get that all kinds of covered up unintentionally. Okay, so now I'm going back one level, adding a little bit more of the medium brown as a shading mechanism. So that means at the edges, at the dark spots, anywhere there would naturally be shading on this little bear, I'm going to kind of enhance that. Now I'm really working with very saturated cardstock. So it's easy to get that in there and smooth it out. See those two colors of ink kind of blend together on their own. But he looks very furry. Hair is hard. I agree. I mean, I've watched a lot of videos on coloring hair, and I think I have some of the basics, like how to leave a highlight, which is basically what I did here on the hat. Like, I feel like, you know, That's like my basic knowledge of hair. But I'm always amazed when people can, especially when they can color like black and gray hair. That is an incredible skill. I don't stamp that many people images, so I haven't had enough practice, but coloring hair, like anything else, is something you just have to put the time in to get the skill. Um, that's how I taught myself watercolor. Is I was just very religious about practicing every day. And you just reach this point where you're like, wow, all of a sudden I feel like I have skill on my own. But it takes a lot, it takes time. Okay. So here is my blended bear. And now he really looks like he has clumpy fur, doesn't he? Oh, I like to color flowers too. I really do. So see what I mean? Y'all were scared. You were scared that this bear was going to look dotty the whole time. But you got to have faith. You have to have faith. Okay. So we are going back through the colors. So I already have my darkest one here. So I'll just repeat this process so you can kind of see. So I ended with the darkest. And I'm going to now go to the YO 2.7 for the first layer of blending. YO 2.7 happens to be the color that I'm coloring his nose as well. So I'll go ahead and put that in, and I'm just going to leave just a little white spot for the highlight on his nose. Like I said, you can always put this back in with a white gel pen, a paint pen. But when I was learning to watercolor, I remember reading, I would get on watercolor forums and I would read, all the rules, the so-called rules for watercolor, which I have since abandoned. You don't need any rules. You just need to make art every day. And one of the rules was, you weren't supposed to use white. You're supposed to leave a highlight. And I took a lot of classes, that said the same thing. But you know what? If you I find this part of the process really enjoyable. It's repetitive. It's kind of relaxing. It's a fun coloring exercise. And if it takes me an hour to, color the bear in a process that I really enjoy, then if I go boop with a white paint pen, have I really violated some art law? I don't think so. I think it's fine. So do whatever you want. Put it in with the pen. Don't put it in with the pen. Leave a highlight. Whatevs. You can do whatever you want. Okay, now I'm noticing that I have a little bit more of a highlight over here on this side of his chest than I do on the other side. So I'm going to kind of fill that in just a little bit. Because once you get rid of the highlights, you cannot get them back unless you go for the white pen. So because my highlight is my lightest color, I don't really want to do that. I don't want to lose my highlight because I don't want it to be white. I want it to be this kind of warm fur color that I've chosen as the overall base. So I'm kind of conservative about what I'm covering up in the highlight department. Thanks. I love this bear too. He's so cute. Because you can always go back and fill in if you need to. Yes, Jamie she is such a good colorist. She's really good at hair. Yeah, so that's what I like to do. I like to hold off on my little highlights. Now, when I get near his nails here, you'll see here I have some little white spots around his toes that I didn't really want to fill in the beginning because it was still adding those layers of color. Now it's okay to fill those in because I'm in these final stages of coloring. So it's totally okay to do that and fill those little puppies in. I like coloring botanicals too. I did a video with OLO. One of the things, I don't know if any of you guys have the paintbrush handles for the OLO markers, but one of the things that you can do with OLO markers, you really can't do with anything else, are those saturation techniques where the ink is blending kind of through your cardstock. And I did a video where you actually do the dark shading on the backside, which actually with this image, you could definitely do. You could definitely add some darks through the back in these. I really like that for botanicals. I like to add like a dark purple on the back of the paper. And then when you color the top of the paper with your lighter color, they blend so beautifully. For example, the one that I did in my video was pansies. And it was really beautiful to have that purple kind of coming through that yellow on the front. And it just makes such a soft blend for botanicals. But that's more the traditional coloring style that a lot of people use with OLO. It's not this mottled texture because we're doing fur. But it is a very, very fun technique. Okay, so that's pretty good for my medium brown, I think. Don't y'all just want to pat him now? Isn't he cute? He's so cute. He's not done, but he's so fuzzy. And you can almost just like reach out and brush this little guy. Okay, so now we're going back to the third color because that was the second one. So we're going back to light. This is YO. Yes, he's huggable. Exactly. YO 2.5. Holler at me if I'm going too long, Kim. And I'll do the same thing. Go into these darker areas, being very careful around my highlights. Like I said, all except for one of these colors that I've chosen, and you just choose whatever you want. I mean, it can be anything you want, but I chose 3 from the YO, so they're a little bit warmer. And then you get this nice contrast with the little bit cooler color of my darkest brown. So I like to do that too. I always like to sneak in cool and warm colors together. I think it makes it more interesting. But you'll just go around all of those kind of cooler darks. I think that area around his face is so cute. This is, if any of you guys are watching from the UK, this is a image from the UK, and American card makers, and I was actually pondering this today when I was getting ready for this live. American card makers, we make smaller cards than Europeans do. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure if just the postal envelope sizing is so different in Europe than it is in the US, but because this is a UK image, he is very large. He's a big old boy. So this is a 5.5 by 5.5 is what I cut my cardstock to. So this would make a 6 by 6 card, which I think is a much more common size in Europe than it is in the US. So these images are really fun to color. So if you are not a talented drawing artist, like many of the artists on this channel are, just phenomenal illustrators, and you're like me and you're not, then some of these European images might be better to practice coloring on because they give you such a big canvas. Or if if there are images that you have downloaded, if somebody has offered a file for you to use, then maybe you can just scale it up a bit on your printer so that it's a little bit bigger. Because for me, any technique, but especially techniques with OLO markers, because you can use so many different textures, like I'm doing, like this is a very unique texture. Sometimes it's better if you have a little space to work in when you're starting out, and then you can just move to the smaller images. I mean, this is exactly the same technique. It's just I had more space on the larger image. So thank you, Linda. So now's the time when you can do any fine tuning that you need to do. One of the things I noticed is I didn't really leave a lot of highlights on his ears, which I kind of wish I had. It happens. So you can do a little removal if you want up there, or you can just say, you know what, maybe his ears are dark today. That's fine too. But you can see, I'll have to grab some still shots from this video and maybe I'll post them. Just to show you like what an evolution you go through when you're building textures like these, and how important it is not to give up partway through a process. Just push through, keep going. It's just a piece of paper. So even if it doesn't work out, it was just a piece of paper. But once you realize that this technique in particular is really all about layering and being patient through that process where the texture is more pronounced, you're going to enjoy it a lot more, I think. So now I'm going back. This is the YO 2.5. Again, you can go back and forth through these colors as much as you want. And just looking at any areas that might need a little better transition, because that's really what this is about, is transitioning from the dark through the medium to the light. But you don't want to lose the character of all of these dots, because that's what gives it the teddy bear look. Okay, nice little Christmas fluffy bear. He's very, very textured and adorable. Okay, look for any unblended areas that don't have a transition. And by transition, I mean you want to see the darkest dark, then you want to see the next darkest, then you want to see the next lightest, and then you want to see the lightest. So you want those to be moving towards the highlighted areas of the image. And usually the last thing I'll do is add really dark darks wherever those need to go. That's kind of my last step, no matter what medium I'm using. Okay, so now we will do his feet, and I will do just a little kind of rounding around the pad of his foot and a little bit on each side of his toe, just down the side of each toe. This is why you don't need to be too concerned about the detail that you left in the beginning, because all of that is going to get covered up, so you can see some kind of just harsher shadows, excuse me, not blended on his toes. And then we come back. Sorry, ragweed is killing me right now. Come back with the lightest color and just blend that little shadow into his foot. Trying to keep kind of the top portion as light as possible. So I'll focus all of the blending on the bottom portion of his foot. So you can see it's pretty well blended there. It doesn't have to be totally blended. Oops. I didn't take the cap off there, so I got a little extra. So I start kind of low around his foot just to get enough ink on the page. And then I'm using the ginger strokes to color the rest of his foot. With his toes, it doesn't really matter. That's such a small space. So we will go there. And I think he looks pretty darn good. So what I'm going to do is show you what do you think? What do you think about his like scritchy fur? I think it's so cute. He really looks like a bear now. So I am going to go in and I am going to do some darker darks, and then I'm going to show you an overall kind of lighter version that I did as a warm up. So if you were doing, for example, if you're doing a black bear, then just switch up your colors to be a little cooler, a little darker. And then if you were doing kind of more of a brown bear, then, or a golden bear, which I don't even know if those really exist or if that's just a California construction. But then I'll show you a little lighter version for different kinds of bears. But then also feel free to go completely rogue and make a pink bear or a blue bear or whatever you want. Okay, so I'm filling in kind of some of the darker areas because as a last step, this really kind of adds a lot of dimension to little areas like around his mouth. And especially if you've put a lot of ink down, which I have, you can kind of really see the difference in how going back with that darkest ink really makes his nose area pop out there at the end. Because when you have those 5 or 6 layers of ink, that will get blended out. It will get a little bit lighter. Whatever the lightest color that you use there is going to lighten the other colors. And so it's good to go back in and put your darks in because it just makes the whole composition look more dimensional. So I'll go in around his leg, give him a little shading there. And that's all it is, just a simple dotting motion. It's not hard on your hands. It's, like I said, it's easy to do without even really paying attention. You could do this in front of the TV, but you'd have this nice kind of curly fur texture that I think is just so cute. So on this one, what I did the same process, going through 2 or 3 or 4 colors, but then I went back and I blended a lot of it with my lightest color versus the other one that you see in the video from a week or 2 ago, which is on this channel. So just go search for it. I show you the more distinct fur texture that's like this on this same image. And then there's the blended one. So here is, oh, you know what I forgot? I forgot something very important. I forgot to give him his little blue eyes, which you got to admit, that's pretty darn cute, the blue-eyed bear. But here's one where I deliberately kept him a lot lighter. So this is more of like a caramely colored bear versus this much darker, kind of more grizzly looking bear with more of that darkest brown. No Santa hat on this bear, Santa hat on this bear, and this one has blue eyes as well. So cute. So it's basically pointillism, but it's kind of a blended pointillism that you use to create that texture and interest on those images. So anything that you can turn into a stuffed animal, you can do it with 4 markers. That's it. That's all it takes. So practice that. If you have any questions for me, let me know. I know his face is so cute, Linda. So cute. I just love him. I love, love, love that texture. But what I really love is how easy and relaxing it is to paint a little bear with just dots. So fun. So you guys go check out. There are actually two, like I said, there was a video that came up today that actually also, I believe, is a bear on this channel with a beautiful fur texture where she talks about how kind of in the middle of the animal, the fur kind of changes direction. And she shows you how to do that. And she was working on a really big image. So go watch that. Go watch my little bear on there as well. And I should be seeing you guys for a different technique very soon. But go color some fur textures. Go get yourself a bear. And practice, 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 practice. Thank y'all so much for being here today. I appreciate it. Check out all the other amazing videos on this channel and the lives. And practice with your OLO markers. Go use them. They're not doing you any good if you're not using them. I will see you guys soon.